Hello, welcome my friends to this lecture. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this lecture. The Tuskegee experiment. This was the most inhuman, long-standing study that happened. Guess where? In America, United States, the heart of the pharmaceutical industry. And this happened after the Nuremberg trials. And it lasted till recent history, like 1970s, not too long ago. And to make it worse, this had a racial element to it because it was done on a racial minority, African American men. So let's get on with it. So what happened? In 1932, the study was initiated, and this had 399 syphilis victims, and then 201 healthy, I guess volunteers, but not really volunteers. They didn't know what's going on. You know what they thought? They thought they were treated for bad blood, and they were from rural America, so they were not very knowledgeable, and they trusted the doctors as you're supposed to. Can you see the innocent African American man there? He looks really trusting, right? And the doctor, he's drawing blood, and he knows exactly what is being done, the doctor, and the patient is clueless. It was quite bad, so there was no consent. And then in 1936, local physicians were told not to treat these patients. As you can imagine, it's a large trial. It had a few hundred subjects, so each subject might visit the local physician. So the local physician, for the trial to work, the local physicians have to comply with the requirements of the trial. And how do they comply? By not treating the subjects. And then in 1940s, some of the men were drafted to the military, and in the military, soldiers are screened for venereal diseases, and if they have a disease, they are treated as one would expect. But what did these big shots in this clinical trial do? They worked with the military. They pulled some strings and influenced the military not to specifically treat these subjects who were in the military. Can you imagine? It's really so many people involved. And then what happened? In 1945, penicillin, the miracle drug, was discovered, and people started to use it as a treatment. And then in 1947, rapid treatment centers were set up in the US to treat syphilis subjects. So do you think our trial participants were treated? Do you think they were admitted to this rapid treatment centers? No. They were deliberately withheld from this life-saving medication. Can you imagine? And they didn't know what ailment they had. If they had the ailment, they will go to their doctor and say, "Hey doctor, do you think we should use penicillin?" But no, they were kept in the dark deliberately. And then what happened? This went on for many decades, many decades. And then finally in 1968, a US Public Health Service employee, Peter Buxton, discovered this horrible long-standing trial. What atrocities, what disrespect for human life it has caused, and he couldn't tolerate it any longer. So what did he do? He tried to blow the whistle, and it wasn't really easy blowing the whistle, right? As you might expect. The big shots in the clinical trial, they tried to influence him not to blow the whistle, but he was a brave young man. He went ahead and blew the whistle. And do you think the public service departments responded to his cry for help? No. You know what they did? They rationalized and justified, and Center for Disease Control claimed that, we have to go ahead with this clinical trial because we have done it for many decades already. This information is so valuable, so it must go ahead. So they decided to go ahead. And Peter Buxton couldn't take it any longer. What did he do? He went to the public. How did he go to the public? He spoke to the media. That's how you do it. When the government doesn't respond to you, you go to the media. And then the New York Times published this article, "Syphilis victims in the US study not treated for whopping 40 years. People couldn't believe it. America, the fighter for liberal rights, the fighter for human rights, the global policeman, how could it happen for 40 years and nobody did anything about it? People couldn't believe it. So after the huge public outcry, the trial ended, as one might expect, and then amends were made. But before that, we talk about the aftermath of the Tuskegee experiment. What happened to the victims? By the end of the study, in 1972, of the original 399 men, 28 had died of syphilis, sadly, and 100 died of related complications, and 40 of their wives were infected. And the worst of all, 19 of their children born to these families had congenital syphilis. And what did these children do? They didn't do anything. They didn't even trust the doctors involved in the trial. They were born into this world with this ailment. Why? Because of this inhuman clinical trial. So anyway, it's not just, it's, these trials which are done outside the ethical requirements, it has many consequences, not just for one person, for many generations to come. This is a good example of that. And then class action lawsuit was set up against the American government. And then what happened? The US government paid $10 million back then in 1972 to the victims, and another whopping $49.6 million in 2017. And then the Tuskegee Free Health Benefit Scheme was set up to provide free health care and even burial services for surviving participants and their infected families. So this was, it doesn't match the atrocities which were done, but it is helpful for the victims. And then reconciliation, what happened? To prevent this sort of horrendous acts from happening again, National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Biomedical and Behavioral Research was set up. This was the first national policy and body set up in America to address bioethics. So it's a very important learning experience, and this body was set up. And then what happened in 1997? US President Bill Clinton, he invited the surviving participants of the Tuskegee experiment, and he held a public apology. These were amazing words. It came from the heart, and it's truthful. We can look at you in the eye and finally say, on behalf of the American people, what the United States government did was shameful, and I'm sorry. This was people had tears in their eyes. Can you imagine? The gentleman, the victim, he's so happy. He had tears of joy in his eyes. Finally, he can believe that he's a human being. He's not just a number in a clinical trial which lasted for 40 years. His human rights are as valuable as any other. Although he might be from the ethnic minority, he is still respected and valued as a member of the society. So hope you loved that lecture, and hope it digs into your heart to realize that clinical trials and society and social policy are intricately linked. And it's not just a scientific industry that we are in. It is a social industry as well. So thank you very much for listening to me. See you next time. Ciao.